When I say the word conflict as it pertains to work, what do you think about? What do you feel? Does it have to do with that colleague you always butt heads with? Or that boss that always challenges you, even when they don't need to? Maybe it's that team member who just wants to do what they want to do rather than what's being asked of them. Get it? I'm sure, like you, I've been in those situations. But conflict can also be something we actually look forward to. Honest. Creative conflict. It's a thing. It absolutely fits that bill, and we as leaders can use it to improve our relationships and actually build trust. Our guest today breaks it down and helps us with it. Hold on. Welcome back to Relationships at Work, the leadership mindset guide for creating a workplace we love. I'm your host, Russel Lolliker, communications leadership nerd. That's me, with a couple of decades of experience in both of those areas. But what I also possess, is a whole heap of curiosity on how we can make the workplace a better place. If you're a leader trying to understand and improve your impact on work culture and the employee experience, well, you have found yourself in the right place. I'm bringing up a word that can seem challenging for so many: conflict. It's something that drums up a lot of opinions, thoughts, feelings. Hell, I added the avoidance of conflict as one of my 7 deadly sins of leadership in that series, which you can actually check out on Spotify. I created a playlist just for those 7 sins. If we figure out how to address conflict, it actually can have big benefits. Big, huge benefits, including improving morale, retention rates, and, you can make that almighty dollar, productivity. I love that embracing conflict can actually lead to innovation and better outcomes. That's where creative conflict comes in. That's where it lives. Psychology Today wrote in 2019 that CEOs have named as a number 1 factor for future success, both for individuals and as organizations, it's creativity. And if you get training in something like creative conflict, even just a little bit, that same article from Psychology Today found that we'll generate way more ideas and more original ideas than if we hadn't got that training. We like using the word innovation a lot, but we're not always sure we do the things to achieve it, or that we want to do the things to achieve it. My guest today, HR Huntsman, he goes right into organizations like ours and introduces creative conflict to their leaders. He's got some suggestions on what we could be doing to introduce creative conflict into our own organizations. Let's go talk to him.
And on the show today, we have HR Huntsman, and here is why he is awesome. He's an executive and business coach and founder and president of Leaders Edge. It's a consultancy helping leaders become the best version of themselves. He's also a bit of a speaker. He's had an impact in that area with almost 30 years of experience giving 3,000-esque talks. I'm just using round numbers here. And he's done this for over 300,000 people worldwide. Welcome to the show, HR.
Russell, it is a pleasure to be here, my friend. Thank you for having me.
So we got to start baseline. We start every episode, which is, sir, what's your best or worst HR employee experience?
Okay, my friend, let's go worst. Let's go to my military days. Got out of high school, joined the Air Force, got a high-end electronics job, top secret. I was planning to spend my life there. Come from a long line of veterans. And I quickly found out that high performance and high achievement wasn't the best route to success and rank. Now, I made rank very quickly, but I realized that time in grade and time in service, those are military terms, were used more than performance. And for a high achiever like myself, that became very frustrating because I began to see myself surrounded by people that I thought were lazy, sloppy, and wasteful and not helping the organization. And that for me was really frustrating. So got out of the military and shortly thereafter started my first company.
It's interesting when you discover that a culture is just not for you while you're in it, especially at that age. It's important to realize that you have some power to leave. those experiences, as opposed to some people. I can imagine there's so many people that may have those experiences, military or otherwise, where they're like, well, I'm 20, I'm 21, I'm going to stick it out for at least a couple of years. And then they're
Right.
way worse off at the other end of that.
That's right. Absolutely right. Obviously, the military, you have in my case, a 4-year contract. So I had to finish the 4 years, unlike the private sector where you can, move around a lot more fluidly. But yeah, I mean, we're autonomous beings. We're in control of our future. Take control of your future.
So let's take control of this episode here, HR. We're
Sounds
talking
good.
today about creative conflict. That's when we first chatted, this came up, and I was really excited to talk about this.
Yeah,
So let's first start by defining what creative conflict is.
love it. I love this topic so much. What creative conflict is, this is where the highest performing teams that we work with, they live here, and the low performing teams we try to get to live here. And what it is this collaborative, high performing environment where respectful disagreement is not only allowed, but it's encouraged. And this is where innovation is bred. This is where creativity is bred. This is where new ideas come from. This is where old ideas are challenged and dead horses are dismounted and killed and put to bed, and new ideas flourish. It's this creative space where all voices in the room are heard, regardless of rank. Rank is thrown out the door, and it's a idea meritocracy. No matter where the idea comes from, it's rated on its own merit, and we're allowed to disagree and challenge. And there's this heat and passion that arises, and great ideas come from this space. But it takes a lot of freaking guts and time to create such a place.
And I mean, my brain is going a little wild here on this. Sounds great.
Sure.
Let's introduce something like this just because. What are the ingredients of a culture needs to have to be able to even embrace a concept like this?
Yeah. Well, at the bottom of it lies trust. When there is mistrust or distrust, you're not going to have creative conflict because of rank. There's going to be people whose voices are weightier, they're heavier, whether it's because of position or time in grade, time in service. They have history there, and that's how we always do things. So trust has to be built, and that often takes a great deal of time. You're right. You just don't walk into a place and have creative conflict. It's built through trust and connections and trial and error and some sting and some pain. And it takes a lot of guts to do it.
I'm seeing how it can be an amazing force for good, an
Sure.
amazing force for demonstration how horrible your culture is. So,
Yep, that's
where
right.
have you seen it as a demonstration of getting it right versus getting it wrong?
Sure. I'll go to one of our current large clients, largest paralegal firm in the entire state of Washington. And when we met them, they asked for our help, and they did not know how to have these conversations. You're very typical, hierarchical, directorial. Direction was given from the top down and carried out by different layers of management, et cetera. Pretty typical structure. Everyone at the top knew what's best. They've been here the longest time. Yada yada yada. They asked for our help to break through these particular barriers, and I said, "Well, we need to mine the creativity and the brilliance that's in the room." They didn't know how to have these conversations. But the key here, Russell, is that the leaders were willing to learn how to listen better and to sometimes be wrong, to not always be the smartest person in the room. And once they gave that freedom and permission, first to themselves to not always have to have the answers, and then to others to speak up over, it's taken about 3 years, we began to build a really good creative environment that's, I can just say it's culminated recently in the development of an entirely new training program and onboarding system, and actually 2 new departments that came organically from team leads and not from management. So really good success story there. And they've tripled in revenue in the 3 years I've been working with them.
Does it often come when somebody approaches you about creative conflict? Does it often come with oh yeah, we'll do this in 2 years. Oh, we'll do this in 2 weeks. Like this weird expectation of time.
Here's how it normally, no, I don't get that a lot.
Okay.
But what I do get is this a lot. Oh yeah, we're ready for that for sure. I'm an open door. Yeah, I don't mind receiving feedback and hearing difficult things until it happens, and then walls can go up and ego is bruised and people are shut down. And once that once that vulnerability has been extended and violated, man, it's harder to get it back the second time than the first time.
So I guess to add to your ingredient of trust is also self-awareness, not only as an individual, but as an organization. Who
Yeah,
are you? What's your stock? How do you
yeah,
value are your values real or not? That sort of thing.
right. And I have to prove to different stakeholders here, like to the principals, I have to prove that there really is brilliance in the room that we can go after if you'll let it happen. And to the frontline people, I have to prove to them that you're going to be able to respectfully disagree and not get your head shot off. And both sides have risk involved. And it takes an artist to help them kind of walk through. And we often get it right, but sometimes it's really hard and people get shot.
Well, not actually, but
Not actually shot, not
not
literally
actually.
shot. No.
Considering the horrificness in some workplaces these days,
Yeah,
just want to be
no, that's
perfectly clear here.
good.
So in that you mentioned risk. What are we risking? So say an organization does decide to set up a creative conflict as an exercise, as part of their DNA. What are they risking in that for good or for worse?
Sure. And let's talk about those different parties. So you have the principals. They are risking ego. They're the founders or the owners or the partners or the board members. They're the C-suite people. They can be risking ego because they may not be right and they may discover that they're not right. And that's really hard on people of position quite often. They're not used to being either told they're not right or discovering that they're not right. And that can be really hard on ego. There's a lot of insecurity in the C-suite and it can be bruised. So they're risking ego. The people on the front line, they're risking position or advancement or retaliation. That's what the biggest fear is. Yeah, they'll say in front of you that they're open to this, but once you leave, I'm shunned, or I'm not called on in meetings anymore. I'm not tapped for projects anymore. So they say the right things when you're around, but there's a little bit of retaliation when you leave. So they risk that.
I want to go back to what we're talking about when we talk about creative conflict.
Yeah.
Is it something we do workshops regularly around? Is it a new way of doing meetings, one-on-ones, performance reviews? How does creative conflict show up in the DNA of an organization that's trying
Yeah.
to have this innovation?
Right. Very, very good question. So we'll initially teach it in workshops because most organizations are not good at this. They don't know how to do this. People hear the word conflict and they run, they shut down. They don't know how to do it well. So we have workshops around it where we will demonstrate it around a particular topic. We call it issue processing. Around a particular topic, a system or a process or a new revenue stream or whatever. We'll use a topic to develop creative conflict. And we'll teach it, we'll talk about trust and collaboration, et cetera. That's how we usually initiate it or teach it. But then we'll take it to absolutely staff meetings, team lead meetings, one-to-one coaching sessions, and how to have it in every one of those settings. You don't have to wait for our monthly or quarterly workshops. You should be having creative conflict as a matter of course within your culture. It should be a matter of course that people can raise their hand and say, I disagree with that, or I have an idea, or I would like to try. That should be just a matter of course as a part of the culture. It has to be developed in each of those different settings.
Completely get that. When you look up creative conflict, you also see the term destructive conflict as sort of
Of
its
course,
yin to its yang.
for sure.
How do they differ, for example?
Yeah. Well, here's how we teach it, Russell. Creative conflict, the tagline we use is for the good of the organization. I respectfully disagree, it's understood for the good of the organization, not because I have a beef with you, because you took my parking spot, you ignored me, you ate my lunch out of the refrigerator. For the good of the organization, I want to submit a different idea, an opposing plan, an alternative strategy. You and I, there's nothing personal involved. We're debating ideas for the good of the company. Destructive conflict is always, well, I won't say always, it's almost always personal. We're attacking a person, we're attacking their demeanor, their character. Whereas in creative conflict, we're talking about great ideas for the good of the company. Does that ring true with you?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
as someone in it's a room that's trying to foster creative conflict and not destructive conflict, and you see it sort of turning, how
Yeah.
do you ensure we're staying on the positive path?
Right. Yeah, we do see that happen quite a bit because again, ego gets involved, insecurity rises up, walls go up. Let's say you and I are in a board meeting or a creative session and I proposed an idea and you like, hey, I disagree with that. I think that we should go this direction. I have to have the security and the moxie to understand you're simply disagreeing with my idea and not with me as a human being. Now, your question was, what happens when that goes south?
Mhm.
And it does. You disagree with me, my insecurity rises up, my red flags go up, my ego gets bruised, and I may push back on you, not on the idea anymore, but just the fact that I don't know, you're a contrarian or you're a poor listener or you never agree with me and how come you always take Peter's side or and when we're in those sessions I have to stop it and go, H, I want to remind you that Russell was just presenting an idea that is contrary to yours. And we really need to just focus on the idea itself. So there's times where I have to call a timeout, calm the room down. Yeah.
But how does that look to everybody else in the room? So I'm going to the ego situation, right?
Oh,
So there's
yeah.
an executive who's, oh, what do you mean? Even they won't even admit they're being defensive, but yet
Yeah.
in the room, they're looking vulnerable. They're being called out.
Yeah.
How is that received? Especially
Yeah.
in a transition where you're trying to implement this.
Oh, Russell, it is tense. Honestly, these are tense times, especially when there's an executive involved. If it's two frontline people or mid-level managers, it's not quite as tense. It can be, but when it's a C-suite person or a founder and owner that's involved, man, the room just goes dead quiet. They're wondering like, H, how are you going to save this? Please stop this. Like we nobody likes this tension, and I have to call it what it is. That's my role. I have to call it what it is. And I have to talk about all of us have ego and we all have insecurity and we need to learn to set those aside. And I'll say, Russell, what were you feeling in that moment when H challenged you? What was going on there? I'll call it to the surface right there in front of a dozen people or the entire executive group or whatever it is. What did that feel like? What were you feeling? This is after I've calmed it down a little bit, right? What were you feeling, et cetera? And we'll have that conversation right there. And those are tough conversations.
Does it get tougher in a remote, in a hybrid situation? Because I can see having those conversations in a room, and there always seems to be having that physical connection helps because you can see body language, you can see, you can feel tone, which you do not get as much through a screen. So how has that changed your approach?
Oh, it's very, very different. I will, let's see how concretely I can say this. I will almost never go there in a virtual situation because it's far too difficult to manage it. Like that conversation that I just relayed to you, I won't go there in a virtual situation. It's too dangerous. It's not as effective. It's not as effective. It's not as powerful. We're not going to get anywhere. Yeah, I won't go there in a virtual situation. It's too difficult.
But then how do you adapt? Because considering a lot of organizations are either going completely remote, how do they have creative conflict when you yourself are saying that it's too dangerous?
What I would do in that, so I haven't had those level of conversations in a virtual situation because they're so much more difficult to manage than right there in the room where everyone's feeling it. Right in a virtual situation, I would certainly call it out again, but not to the same degree. I would say, okay, gang, Russ, H, let's calm down a little bit. We're focusing on the idea. I would probably bring it back to that level. Let's just focus on the idea. And then what I would do after that is I do one-to-one coaching with each person, and I would address it that way on the backside is how I would do it in a virtual situation.
Yeah, I mean, so my background's all communications, and I can feel
Oh,
in this situation
yeah.
that in a situation like you're describing, in a room, you may have to have a follow-up session after
Yeah.
to develop it. But in a virtual situation, I can almost feel, and you kind of illustrated this, multiple follow-ups.
Yeah.
It's almost
That's right.
it's almost like within a virtual session, it's more ripples in a pond that you have to address, as opposed to we're all here, it's a powder keg, let's deal with it. But it lasts a little longer virtually. That's how I would approach it. But I hear what you're saying.
You're exactly right. Because so much of communication are the nonverbal body signals that we're getting. That's why we lose so much in the virtual setting. So because we lose all that, we do have to have multiple conversations to pick up on all that nuance that was lost, that when we're in the room, we can feel it. I mean, you can feel the energy there. You can't feel that in a virtual situation. So you're absolutely right that multiple conversations would be required.
So what's the role of a leader in they want to have an organization, they want to have a culture that embraces creative conflict. They want to not shy away from this. So they have
Uh,
to be obviously nurturing and encouraging the culture.
yeah.
What are they doing?
So we teach two things, two S's. You need to have space and you need to have safety. So you need to create the space in the calendar. Most organizations don't. They're so busy doing the day-to-day widget development that they don't have the space for having these kinds of innovative conversations about future widget development. They're too busy making today's widgets. So number one is the leaders have to create the space in the calendar and make it a priority for strategic conversations such as this, whether it's new product design or systems development or team build, whatever it is, space. Safety goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The psychological safety has to be developed. That takes time. And that means the leader has to go first. The leader has to demonstrate vulnerability, the willingness to be wrong, the willingness to be corrected. All those things the leader has to develop, has to take some risk at it first, because if the leader's not willing to take the risk, Russell, no one else is going to take the risk. Guaranteed. So it's the responsibility of the leader to step out and say, gang, I mean it when I tell you that I want to hear constructive critique about what we're doing. Fire away. I'm going to listen the best I can. My ego could be bruised through this, and so I may raise up a little bit, but I promise you I'm going to work myself back down. I promise you I want to become a better listener. I promise you I want to get better at hearing your feedback. Bear with me. I'm a flawed human being, but let's go. Man, if they can do that, that's freaking gold.
Where does diversity, equity, and inclusivity fit into this? Because not everybody takes conflict the same way. And this could just be cultures within an organization, much less cultures from around the world. How do you
Yeah.
approach that differently?
The same way, just a bit more tenderly, a bit with understanding about different backgrounds, cultures, what is brought into the room with those understandings. Not everyone comes with the same type of understanding. I encourage conversations ahead of conversations. This is what we're going to be doing in this creative conflict scenario. I'd love to get your feedback on how that feels to you from different backgrounds, different cultures, different settings. How does that feel to you? What are your thoughts on this? How would you respond to that? Like I do have meetings before meetings to prep people for the creative conflict that's going to happen in that meeting. Because you're right, we all bring our scar tissue, our cultural biases, we bring all that with us. And those are real things that have to be addressed.
I'm even thinking generationally.
Yeah.
I'm hearing phrases like career limiting moves when it comes to, saying anything contrarian to the
Right.
way the organization's going.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there are generations after me who have no problems being honest, open, and transparent. I'm jealous as hell, but it's not how I was raised.
Right.
So how do you approach that group of generations who are a lot more embracing of this, and a
Yes.
generation that's going, you know what? I need to meet you halfway.
This is great. In fact, this is the conversation we have more often than not, is the generational conversation, not the cultural conversation. It is the generational one. We have some boomers left. We have X, Y, and Z now all in the same room. I'm X myself, old school grinder, wake up, hand to the plow, work yourself to the bone, burn out at 45, restart at 50 with a new, that's my story. Listening to X and Y, the millennials and Y come behind us and share different stories, I do have to prepare my generation of leaders to hear those stories because some of them are not good at hearing them. And I hear a lot from them that, young people today, like these millennials and these Gen Zs, they're lazy and they're everything we've all heard. And I can tell you from my experience, I have lots of 20 and 30 and 40 something clients. That's not my experience. These are amazing leaders and great thinkers, and there's lazy people at every generation. They just want to work differently. And that's where my coaching comes into the C-suite and founders, in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s, is they just want to work differently. And we need to listen to what that looks like, because they're on their way in and bro, you're on your way out. So if you're not going to listen, you're going to be passed by. That's what I tell them. You're going to be passed by. The leaders that do listen are going to pass you by.
And I love that, because it's come up in a conversation recently where you have older generations of leaders going, "Oh, I'm so worried about these Y leaders and these Z leaders." And I'm like, but you're responsible for training them. That's your
Yes.
fault if they're bad leaders. You're the
Right.
one that's supposed to be setting the table for how they show up, how they learn. You just can't cross your arms and go, the youngins today, which are now 45 when we talk about millennials.
That's a fact. No, that's a fact. And you're right about the training. So a lot of the work we're doing with the companies we work with is all about cross-functional training and leadership development, because some of these wise leaders are learning that by investing in these young emerging leaders increases retention, productivity, innovation, creativity. By investing in them and getting their ideas is great for the organization. It's a win scenario. And the Y and Zs are asking for it. They want someone to invest in them.
Have you ever approached or been approached by an organization, or any experience you've had where you're like, you know what, you're not ready for creative conflict? This is maybe in 3 years, but right now you are just not prepared to take this kind of a leap.
Oh gosh, yes. I can think of two organizations. One was a $100 million RV company. The other is a very high-end, well-known jewelry company, and both run by Miranda from Devil Wears Prada situation. Both, one, the RV was highly volatile, temperamental. Well, so was the jewelry CEO. They were absolutely not ready for a creative conflict. They couldn't handle it. Their ego was too big, too volatile. They knew everything. They were the know-it-alls in the room. They diminished everyone who would disagree with them. Absolutely not ready. And I walked away from both of them.
What's the tipping point for you to go, this is somebody I can't work with,
Yeah.
versus, oh, I can work with you. You're not ready, but I can work with you. What is your tipping point for that?
Yeah, we require 4 things of anyone that we're gonna work with. Authenticity, you have to show up as your real self. Vulnerability is key here, and that's what these people are missing. Vulnerability to say, "I don't know, I don't have the answer, I need to hear, sometimes I fail." Teachability and accountability, and sometimes the CEOs don't wanna be held accountable for their own behavior and performance, so when they're violating those 4 core values of ours to the detriment of the people around them, I tell them, "You're not ready and I can't work with you."
How does it hurt an organization not to have creative conflict? I'm thinking it from employee culture standpoint,
Sure.
because I'm thinking of those organizations that reached out and you're like, I'm thinking that they saw it in a brochure or they saw it on a leadership retreat where it's like,
Right.
you need
Yeah.
creative conflict in your
Yeah.
organization. So they saw it in the
Yeah.
checkbox.
Yeah.
But if they're not ready, what's the detriment to the organization to not have
Sure.
that creative conflict?
Yeah, first of all, no one comes to me and says, "H, we need more creative conflict in our organization." They don't say that. But what they say is, "I want more engagement. I want more buy-in. I want less turnover." They're looking at the results, right? They're looking at, the lagging indicators. "I want more productivity. I want more accountability." And I say, "Absolutely, I can get you those things. The route goes through creative conflict. The route to all those things that you're asking me for makes its way through creative conflict, and there's no way around it." So, without creative conflict, what you're going to have is less engagement because you're not asking me my opinion. I'm not valued. My ideas are not embraced, right? So, when I'm not valued or heard or seen clearly, I'm only going to give you about, in fact, our research shows that you're only going to get about 40% of my best effort. So productivity is diminished, right? You have the quiet quitting. This is where quiet quitting comes from, is because people aren't being seen and heard and valued and listened to. So they're giving you about 40% of their best efforts. Profitability is down, turnover is high, obviously retention is low. We all know that turnover costs like 230% compared to retention. I mean, you're just burning cash is what you're doing by not having the guts to open up the floor to creative conflict. You're just setting cash on fire and you're okay with high turnover, low productivity, low engagement. You're saying I'm okay with that. And you're just setting cash on fire. The studies show that high engaged creative conflict types of cultures, they get about 80% of people's best efforts. Now it's not 100, it's 80, but that's twice as much as 40, which means you get a 200% increase in engagement and productivity, which is going to lead to far higher profitability and accountability. And it's a 200% increase just by having the guts to have these kinds of conversations.
And I wish more leaders wouldn't look at it like a quick win. It's just sort of like, we'll get an HR in here and done. We're done, right? It's done. As opposed to, and I remember listening to some members of my own team a couple of years ago where they would be very comfortable speaking truth to power. They had no problem telling me I was an idiot, and I had no problem with it at all because they were way smarter than I was on a lot of topics. I'm like, no, tell me I'm wrong. I need to learn. But they would take that safe bubble of confidence that they had within my team, and then they would apply it in situations where it wasn't but they still felt that they could do truth to power. But it added a level of uncomfort because it was a different culture, a different subculture.
Yeah.
But immediately when they came back to my group, I'm like, congratulations. I love that you felt confident and powerful enough to speak truth to power in those situations. It made everybody really uncomfortable,
No
but
joke.
I'm really glad that you made us sit in that uncomfortability.
Yeah. Yeah. What we teach is not, I mean, I love the truth to power idea. The way we approach it is far more about asking great questions and listening, not speaking in a directorial sort of way, like, "Russell, you're an idiot." But, "Russell, what's your idea on this? I'd love to hear your experience here." It's far more the curiosity and inquiry model that we teach that brings, the way we say is, bring greatness out of the people around you.
I love that. And to be clear, they called me an idiot because the relationship at that level, we worked together for so long,
Sure.
it was that comfort
Yeah.
level, but they would take that truth to power through questions. I'm glad you clarified that.
Okay,
But
good.
actually how they did it was through really poignant, important,
Good.
relevant, all questions that actually improve the organization. If answered properly, they were just truth to power questions that most
Perfect.
people wouldn't ask. So no, I'm
Perfect.
thrilled you packaged it in curiosity, because I think that's missed, because you hear truth
Yes.
to power, career limiting moves, but
Yeah.
not it's baked in curiosity.
Yeah. It's got to be baked in curiosity. It's absolute fact.
How have you seen light bulb moments work when you worked for organizations where maybe they were going down the path and they weren't there, but then they had that 1, 2, or third session? They're like, oh, okay. Yep. Nope. The leaders get it. Executive gets it. Employees get it. Can you share any case studies? You don't have to name names, but any
Sure.
case studies where you're like, you literally saw a light bulb show up above their head?
Absolutely. I'll go back to just as recently as 2 weeks ago. We're working with a large heating and cooling company here in Washington State. And over this last 6 months, sales were way down and couldn't figure out why. And they were convinced that it was because the marketing language was wrong at the top of the funnel. So they bring us in for this creative conflict conversation. We do what we call issue processing. We drew the entire funnel up. And as you just said, just baked in curiosity, I'm asking a million questions about the sales team, the marketing language, their value prop, their value chain, how the baton is handed down, blah, blah, blah. And every department is reporting in, yada, yada, yada. And about 3 hours into this 4-hour session, dawned on them that it wasn't the top of the funnel that was a problem, because we had identified one level of conversion was getting a 55% conversion rate in sales, and one was getting an 11% conversion rate from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. And so I began just drilling on an 11% conversion rate. Like, what is the problem there? And they realized they were addressing referral potential clients the same way as cold call clients, in the same manner. They didn't have a different system. And so through creative conflict, someone said, we need to build in some third-party advocacy through here, getting some testimonials baked into this conversation with the cold calls, because the referral people, they come with already some trust built in. They already have third-party advocacy. They said, okay, at this stage, and this stage, let's have a testimonial video here. Let's have some testimonials built into our booklet here. Immediately, they're like, oh my gosh. Russell, within 2 weeks, that 11% has gone up to 60%, because they're willing to sit in a room and just pound each other with questions, navigate the minefield through all departments. And because they had the guts to do that, they're able to radically and almost immediately reverse their sales and close rates in this particular area. It was beautiful. I loved it. I walked out of there feeling like I just won the Super Bowl watching these guys do this.
I know it's situational, but I wanted to ask, do you have a favorite question when it comes to spurring a little creative conflict?
A favorite question. So all my best questions begin with what? I can't say a favorite question. I have a favorite question in one-to-one coaching, which is, how do you get in your own way?
Okay.
That's my favorite one-to-one coaching question. As far as a creative conflict question, oh, okay, yeah, let's do this one. What are we afraid to address that everyone knows but no one is saying?
Ooh, that's good. That's good.
What are we afraid to talk about? Everybody's talking about around the water cooler, the lunchroom. What are we afraid to address that everyone knows but no one wants to talk about? It's the elephant in the room. It's probably my favorite question.
And I'm sure a pin drops right after it's asked.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, I know what we're all afraid to talk about. Yeah, that's my
Thank you
favorite.
so much for this, HR. It's been great.
Oh, you're fantastic.
I'm going to wrap it up, sir, with
Yeah.
the same question I ask all, which is, what's one simple action right now
Okay.
people can do to improve their relationships at work?
Okay. Lean into conflict. Lean into conflict. Don't run away from it. It's not going to do you any good. You're just delaying it. Lean into the conflict in a respectful manner. Ask questions. Listen well. Reframe what you hear. So I'll say it again. Lean into conflict. Don't run away from it. Ask questions. Listen well. Reframe what you hear. And then repeat the cycle.
That is HR Huntsman. He's an executive business coach, founder, president of Leaders Edge, and a professional speaker. And he's just made me a very happy boy, want to embrace creative conflict. Thank you so much.
Russell, you're the best. Thanks, my friend. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you soon.
That's it. That's all. That is another episode of Relationships at Work, the Leadership Mindset Guide to Creating a Workplace We Love. I'm Russell. Love spending time with you. Thank you so much for spending it with me. And if you don't mind spending just a few more moments, could you hop over to the ratings and review section on your Apple app or your Spotify app? If you scroll down to the bottom, you can actually leave a 5-star rating or a little blurb, a little review of how you found the show valuable, how it sort of maybe helped you along your leadership journey. Anyway, if you take that extra little bit of time, I couldn't appreciate it more. Thank you so much. All right, take care.